Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. Our Week 8 reaction presented by Uber Eats. Get almost anything for game day. All right. Greatest ugly game in the history of the NFL. Washington beats the Bears 18-15 on a Hail Mary. Let me just start with this. Washington was the better team. They were the better coached team. I thought Chicago's offensive coaching at the end of the game was egregiously horrible late in the game. And let me just say, Caleb and his movement and his side arming stuff, you can see the Mahomes comps. He's running around. The O-line's getting overwhelmed. First of all, it was 9-0 at half. Chicago had 33 yards passing in the first half. I thought the game was over. But Chicago, their defense, kind of kept them in the game. And then Washington's offense stalled. But John, the 3rd and goal where the Bears did the fridge Perry, the following drive on a 3rd down to win the game, you thought. They did a draw, essentially putting in the hands. The whole game came down to one play. Thank God Keenan Allen, it was pass interference. I didn't get that. They made no attempt. It felt like the 3rd down was just setting up 4th down, and they had to have a touchdown to take a lead. So I just couldn't stand Chicago's offensive coaching. And I know it's a Hail Mary, but my take was Washington was the better team.
100%. Could not agree more. There was a stat that popped up, I think in the second half, that said he was 4 of 13 for 36 yards, that being Caleb. I thought, on this drive, can't be the game. And I had to double check. It was the game. Their offense was horrendous. Their defense was outstanding. I wrote down, even when it was 9-0, it felt, 28-0. Complete control. Jayden didn't just look like the best player in the game. He looked like one of the best players in the league. The thing I wrote down is, if you could pick these two coaching staffs, Eberflus, Waldron, and Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, the gap is like going from a star starting quarterback to some random backup. You're like, it's not even close. That's why when they take the lead, I'm like, listen, it's sports, crazy things happen. But there haven't been many games this season where a team would have came away with a victory that was like, you didn't even come close. To call the play to a backup offensive lineman on, I was 1 year old with the refrigerator Perry plays, but he did it a lot, right? It was part of their arsenal. They weren't a good, obviously Walter Payton, but they weren't some dynamic offense. You drafted a receiver 9, you got Keenan Allen, you got DJ Moore. Your running backs are the reason you're in the game.
Yes.
If it wasn't for Swift's whatever huge run,
it
wouldn't even have been close. It was like, that gave them life because they had none. They had none. To give them that play, even they ended up taking the lead with 20 seconds left. I think that has to go down as the most egregious play call of the season. Second would probably be that. Remember that fake play the Bills ran? I think against the Ravens when they were storming. But that was way worse. To get backup offensive lineman, it's not even, you can't even blame him. Belichick would say it's not on the player, it's on the coach. You can't put that guy in that position. Right? It'd be like me, hey, John, make this video edit. I'd be like, where do I don't know. What do I do? That was crazy, Colin. It really was. They got lucky. The bounce or something didn't land where the guy did take it to the house. That could have been historic disaster on a given play.
And here's the other thing. I beat up on defensive coaches. The Bears were off a bye. The first half, no clever. Nothing. They weren't quick to the line. They weren't quick out of the huddle. It was just plodding. There wasn't any energy. And I understand off a bye. When we watch a McVay off a bye or some of these really well-coached teams.
Andy.
Or even Shanahan. You're like, Shanahan opens with the Jets. You're like, this is a mismatch. You can see the plays. Off a bye, it like was a Sirianni. It's like you got nothing. You have no design plays. And it's one of those things where in the first half, Jayden Daniels was the best player on the field. I will say Caleb won't show up in the box score, but his ability, because Washington's pass rush, John, especially in the early portions, I think what happens sometimes Washington's defensive line controlled the first half. These are 300-pound guys. I thought they wore down in the fourth, and it gave Caleb another second to maneuver around. They're big. I mean, these guys like Payne. You can't get 60 snaps out of these guys at the same energy level. And I thought Caleb bought time. I thought he made a couple of really, really high-end throws in the fourth quarter. But, John, that drive that gave them the lead, on third down, this is not a field goal situation. You're going to score. They run another quarterback draw. And I thought, just after running a previous one, I thought, well, what are we doing here?
On first down, they ran a fade into the corner of the end zone. Like, what are you doing? Just slam the ball in. You're running the ball right down their throat.
So I just hated the Bears play calling. And not just because I had Washington as a side, but there are moments in the season where I feel bad for teams where like they outplay, they out scheme, they end up on the wrong side of a game. I always kind of root for the team that looks like they put the effort in, they had a plan. I don't like luck wins, but they happen in football. I mean, shit happens. I mean, guys get hurt, you get bad breaks. But I will say
happens in all sports. Could have happened last night in the Yankee game if they would have came back in the ninth inning. It's like they didn't deserve to win that game. It's just that's why we watch.
But let's just say this right now. In terms of entire staff, Washington's got to have, I think it has a top 5 to 6 staff in the league. If you're counting both coordinators, I don't know. This pass defense was egregiously bad in the first month. Even that's gotten better. It was the worst pass defense for 3 weeks. So they're coaching the hell out of that thing.
Well, the two rosters, they spent a lot of money on their offensive line in Washington, and it's actually pretty solid. But the rest of the roster relative to the Bears, right? I mean, the Bears got better wide receivers. They definitely got a way better defense. I mean, they got a fantastic secondary. I mean, how good does Montez Sweat look? I mean, the guy looks like
Jesus,
Myles Garrett or something. Couple ththings. I think you give Caleb credit for competitive character because that was a game where he could have just folded like a cheap tent, and you could tell he was pretty down on the sideline. And then those last couple drives, the second to last one, he made a couple miraculous plays. Little Allen Iverson juke move of a defensive lineman to keep a play alive, throwing across his body. It looked like USC last year versus Arizona. Remember when he was just making some of these plays? You're like, holy shit, he did that tonight.
Yeah.
Another thing, I think if Chicago could have a do-over, I'm a huge Rome Odunze fan. He's going to be an excellent player. He would play for any team in the league. They had an opportunity with a top 10 pick, and their offensive line is not good.
Yeah.
And there were several offensive linemen on the board. It's, I get it. Receivers are sexy. You can find wide receivers all over the league. You can trade for them in the middle of the season. To not draft the Penn State guy, the Oregon State guy who can play 5 different positions.
Yeah.
So everyone, and I would imagine, the way the game ended, that's going to be the headline. But if it had just been a Washington just dominant victory, it would have been shitting on Caleb. And he did not play well. That offensive line was getting worked. And this was my concern. Like, I don't give you get credit because you've been an underachieving team. So you take care of teams like Carolina. That's the first step of like becoming good. You got to beat the bad teams, but it doesn't translate when you play better teams. It's why, like, you watch that first half, you're like, this team, they're going to let a lot of people down in that city because they're not going to be able to play with good teams. And it starts with their 5 offensive linemen. Washington is not. Joe Gibbs, I would imagine, had a pretty good defensive line. That's not what they're rolling out. I mean, this defensive line, I'm having to Google some of these guys. It's really more Dan Quinn, rah coaching these guys up. And they are getting beat like a drum on like every other play. So, yeah, Caleb, obviously you're kind of freaking out back there. You don't have any time and the balls start flying all over the map. But how many times did he step back 2 seconds later and there's like 3 guys coming at him? It's crazy.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody this weekend. Harbaugh was either going to take Joe Alt or Thomas, the wide receiver in Jacksonville. Mike Thomas.
The 5th pick?
He apparently, this is what I was told. I mean, he loved Mike Thomas. And he's like, we got to protect our asset. We got to get Joe Alt. And that, people had Mike Thomas at like 15th, 20th. Apparently,
well, he's good. He had a touchdown a day. I mean, the guy makes plays every week.
No, he's just unbelievable. And Harbaugh was like, I think Harbaugh recruited him. Michigan couldn't get him.
Yeah.
And so, unlike the Bears, and the Chargers needed a receiver much more than the Bears did. And they went with Joe Alt because the take was, I got to protect I got to protect Justin Herbert. So I like
and remember Harbaugh said that we view offensive linemen as weapons, the tip of the spear.
Yeah, and today was the classic ugly Chargers win where, it was just, boy, though, we'll talk about it later, but Jesus, Herbert's talented, freaking talented. Not working with much, talented. DraftKings is offering $1 million a day in bonus bets for the first 10 days of the NBA season. That's $10 million in bonus bets. Here's how to shoot your shot. Opt in, get a daily NBA profit boost token. You pick a pregame NBA player prop to boost. If that player leads the league that night in points, rebounds, assists, you win a share of $1 million in bonus bets. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The code is Colin, Colin, to win a share of $1 million in bonus bets if your player is king of the court. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, next game, New England beats the Jets 25-22. So, we could just beat up on Aaron. But I mean, the field goal, they can't hit a field goal. They can't hit a PAT. But here's my bigger takeaway. You haven't won since Robert Saleh left. And when they fired him, I said, you just let your best coach leave the room. You just let him leave. And the defense is not as good, John. They're not as good. Look at that final drive by Brissett. He had time to throw. And Aaron is a pocket quarterback who had 17 completions and no longer moves well. They have weapons. They've got Lazard. They've got Garrett Wilson. They've got Devontae Adams, who had, 5 catches, 50 yards, whatever, 4 catches, 50 yards. But you can't say they don't have Breece Hall. You can't say they don't have weapons. But it's actually, it's the truth is they're not as good defensively now.
Well, they're bad.
And this is classic Jets. They are now a mediocre defense with a 40-year-old quarterback who's a total pocket quarterback. And Ian O'Connor had a tweet during this game. He said, the Jets talk about energy. They're slow out of the huddle. They're slow to the line. He said, they're just a plodding, slow, energyless offense. Well, that's on Rodgers. That's on Aaron. And so I can blame it. But the Jets had 8 penalties. New England didn't have as many penalties, and New England's the younger team. I think it's just a systems failure. It's just a mess of an organization.
I think they got so many things going on. One, when they fired Saleh and they make Ulbrich become the head coach, you're basically losing out twice, right? Your defense is going to get worse because he has to focus on other things, and the things he has to focus on, he has no clue what he's doing because he's never done it. Be like, hey, John, we need to keep rolling with the podcast and now also be the head of sales. We would probably lose out on both. The podcast would get worse and sales might go down. Why? Because it makes no sense to put me in that position. So you put Ulbrich, Colin, I don't think I've ever seen this in my entire life, high school, college, or the pros. Going into the second quarter of the football game, the Jets had 0 timeouts. They used all of their timeouts in the first quarter. And it was offensively, they I don't know how many delay of games they had. They literally had a delay of game when they scored the final touchdown to take the lead in the game on the 2-point conversion. So Ulbrich's going to take a lot of shit. I can't blame him for the delay of games. He has nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers.
That's right.
Offense.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Now, in fairness to Aaron, they go down, they score. Not in a million years. And I'm rooting for this Jets collapse because it's pretty fun. I never thought Jacoby Brissett could lead him down the field and score a touchdown. Even how bad the Jets defense has played the last couple of weeks since Robert Saleh has left. That was jarring to watch that. And now I think we have to acknowledge their defense, which has been held to high esteem, is just, it's not only average, it's just not good at all. Yeah. And this notion that you can just have a team full of mercenaries, we've learned over the last 5-6 years, it doesn't even work in the NBA, which is much more individual meets team. It 100% over the history of football, you can sign a big name guy who shows up in OTAs and come. They're just, the Reddick thing is a classic example of Drew Rosenhaus, when they signed him, was quoted of saying, yeah, I just went right to the owner. How is that normal? In a situation, so your GM is useless. This guy, you basically give him all. And then I even saw today, he's like, yeah, it's pretty rusty. Of course he's rusty. He showed up 3 days ago. This team is really an embarrassment to football. And it's something that, I'm not trying to give myself credit or anyone that bet against them, but I didn't think it would be this bad. Obviously, today is I mean, this is one of the lowest points for any high-priced team of my lifetime. I mean, to be 2-6, Colin, right?
Well,
You played 8 games. You got 9 games left. To get to 9 games, you'd have to go 7-2 down the stretch. This seems not. They can't be the Patriots. They're not going 7-2. They'd be lucky to go like 5-4.
yeah, and you know, as I watched that game, whereas I mean, we both said this. I thought the Bears were a poorly coached show today. It's the Bears have talent. New England doesn't have much. I mean,
No.
the Jets have, of the 22 starters, would probably have 16 to 17 starters of these
I think
two
the
teams.
Patriots were missing a bunch of guys today too on defense.
They were.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think the question becomes, does Aaron come back? Does Aaron say to himself, this isn't going to work? Aaron tends to get into his manifesting vision board,
the darkness.
sanguine. He used that, that optimistic kind of metaphor this week or word. I think he would come back. But if you're the Jets, you have to draft a quarterback. You have to draft a quarterback because, frankly, the roster doesn't have a ton of needs. You have to go get a quarterback, and it's a bad quarterback class.
You know, one thing with these YouTube TV4 boxes, sometimes you have a game right above each other, and I had the Packer game right below or above the Jets game. And Jordan Love's, who got hurt again. I mean, the guy's been pretty banged up this season, but what a job by LaFleur. But his mannerisms are just like a young prime Rodgers. The way he moves, the way he just flings it and lets his arm go. And you're watching him just throw some of these balls, and he can be a little erratic, with just such confidence to those young guys. And then you look down, and one thing I wrote down is Rodgers used to throw with such confidence in the prime of his career, and then even those couple years when he really got it rolling with LaFleur. And you watch him now, like, we have to acknowledge he no longer can move. He's getting peppered. Okay, he's 40 years old coming off an Achilles. Understandable. I feel like he just throws these lollipops. Like sometimes you see with Caleb, like he doesn't really know where it's going. Rodgers never really played like that. It was either throwing it away or throwing a dart to a guy and hitting him in the hand. And now these balls go up into traffic like, well, I can't move to save this. I got to get rid of it. Fuck it. Well, I mean, what? It's the Jets. I mean, what? Yeah. It feels like he's as loosey-goosey because you've been on him as much as by far anybody that talks about, football, that he really is sneaky, like kind of hides from risk-taking. It's not really his thing. And now it's like he just kind of lets it go all over the place. So they have gone all in on this player who is, I mean, if peak Rodgers was a 98 out of 100, the guy they're getting now is like 70 or something on good series. And he can look sometimes like a 50. And sometimes the ball just flies up. You're like, that could be a disaster. And that was never his thing, ever his thing. So they got this player who is no longer good enough. Like, he's not a top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
No, God, no.
No. But I'm saying, like, when last year and even coming back into this year, it's like, hey, if we get a guy between like 8 to 12 and be really good, like he's floating, like look at in and all these really talented. I'm watching Josh Allen today, like he's in a different universe as Aaron Rodgers.
Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold this moment are better than Aaron Rodgers.
For sure. Kirk
Much
Cousins
better
is a better player. I mean, all these guys are better players.
Yeah. Okay, I got to talk about this. Texans beat the Colts 23-20. It's not a overly sexy game. I have so many notes on this game. So Chris Ballard has built, it's a good roster. Just offensive players. Jonathan Taylor, stud. Pittman, Josh Downs, workable tight ends. With Shane Steichen, he cannot get close to completing 50% of his throws. His judgment's horrific. He is totally big play reliant. I'm watching that game today. He left, I think it was the third quarter, I wrote it down. He left the game. He said afterwards, I was just tired. Like, I'm sitting there watching this, and they have players. This team had opportunities to beat the Texans. They have dudes. I know CJ Stroud's going 25-37, 300 yards, dominates time of possession. The Colts can't sustain drives with Anthony Richardson. They were horrific on third. John, there are times, I knew he was young coming in, but the bottom line is he is so far behind that if you stay with, it may be 2 to 3 years for Anthony Richardson to be able to go to the line, audible to a third play, scan the field. I watched him. He's a great athlete. John, you cannot win in this league. That's a bad division.
Yeah.
You can't win in this league. They have players in Indianapolis. Today I watched the game, and with young quarterbacks, I always feel like let's give him Thanksgiving of the second year. Unless he makes, I mean, you watch Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams, their self-awareness in these. Oh, Nick's today is chopping it up. This kid is not even in the stratosphere of those guys in self-awareness, pocket awareness. It was jaw-dropping how bad he was today.
Yeah, he was 2 of 13 in the first half. And one of the passes was a blown coverage for a touchdown where the guy was wide open. And even when the ball left his hand, you're 50-50 in the air if it's going to hit the guy. He's a horrendous football player. And let's face it, when he came back from injury, they chose, we have to see if this guy's going to be good enough /
That's right.
And over making the playoffs. Joe Flacco plays out this season like they're going to win 9-10 games and be in the playoffs. They could barely beat Miami last week with Huntley and Tim Boyle. I mean, barely won that game. And it's because of the quarterback. Jonathan Taylor, every time I looked up today, he looked like Walter Payton out there. Juking guys, breaking tackles.
Nobody.
Even their
you
defense
can't bring him
was
down on the first.
CJ Stroud nonstop.
You can't bring down Jonathan Taylor on the first hit. Can't.
They were peppering CJ Stroud today. So their defense, which, most people don't think is the most talented and people are very critical of Gus Bradley, was, I think I read today, hit him on like 29, a 30-something drop. I mean, they were hitting him constantly, and they're right in the game, and this guy just can't. You cannot function as a NFL quarterback. Like, to be a great quarterback, you have to be able to do it all. But just to play quarterback, you have to be able to hit a wheel route. You have to be able to hit a quick out route. You have to be able to run the plays when they are working. And he cannot. And you get to a point where, forever, up until Josh Allen, most people thought it was impossible to improve accuracy. That's why most people wouldn't touch you if you were an inaccurate quarterback. Really one of the only examples in NFL history is like Warren Moon, who got dramatically more accurate as he got, but he was a complete outlier. And then Josh Allen, I'm pro just in general in life, take a big swing, totally understood Anthony Richardson, but there's a huge risk reward in that. This isn't like investing in the Apple. This is investing in something that could go belly up or 500x. And right now you are staring bankruptcy in the face because you can't play. Obviously, the Texans are a playoff team, but you're playing shitty teams like Miami and getting by the skin of your teeth because this guy can't complete basic routes. Everyone likes him. High character guy, works hard. At the highest level of pro sports, it's there gets to a point where all that stuff, okay, we're rooting for, but are you good enough? And he's not even remotely close to average on basic things.
Yeah. And
most inaccurate quarterback in the NFL.
Oh, and listen, it is Tebow just didn't have the arm strength or the mechanics. This kid's got arm strength plus. And, the other thing that you have to think about, remember when the Niners moved off
What do you do, Colin? I mean, they drafted him 4th overall. Yeah, you bench him and just go to Flacco and try to win games? Because if you want to make the playoffs, that's what you have to do.
Yes, I would. And they could go on a 6-game winning streak with Flacco. There's no question. They have players.
They would have won today, probably.
But it's when Kyle Shanahan moved off Trey Lance, you're like, wow, Kyle made Matt Schaub a Pro Bowler. So if Kyle gives up on you, you don't give up a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance unless you're the Cowboys. When Shane Steichen and these weapons, 2 of 13, these are the scripted plays with one of the smartest coaches in the league in Shane Steichen, who we saw him with a rookie, Justin Herbert. We saw him make Jalen Hurts, who has regressed, into an MVP level player. So I think you just have to say, listen, we're just going to go. We're just going to roll with Flacco and go, because I wouldn't be shocked if Flacco won 5 out of 6 games. I wouldn't be shocked. I like the Colts' weapons, Downs, Pittman, Taylor. I like their players.
Well, up until probably 5 or 6 years ago, a guy like Anthony Richardson, based on his small collegiate history and inaccuracies, would not have sniffed the first round. We entered this quarterback inflation post Mahomes and Josh Allen, where everyone thinks those guys are both once in a generation players. Yeah. I'm never been a big believer in, I think we saw the Kenny Pickett's and Mac Jones versions are the worst case. They don't even have the physical skills and they're clearly not good enough. The physical skills, I mean, he says, I was exhausted. Well, no shit. They have to run you because they can't pass. When they pass, they got to punt. And I think we all acknowledge, like, this guy's a really good coach. And he's proven it now with countless different type quarterbacks. Like, this is not a coaching thing. This is a basic, like, some guys in basketball just can't shoot. They get with every coach under the sun, and they're never going to be able to shoot. Yeah.
Yeah.
He could, the best shooting coach in the history of the league, nothing would change. And I think that's, the more you watch this kid play, you're like, he would be inaccurate for the next 10 years. But how much longer is he going to get to play? Because you could pull the trigger right now and go to Flacco Monday morning and just say, hey, we're gonna give you a breather, buddy.
I mean, listen, Cam literally struggled with mechanics and accuracy, but Cam would have a 23 of 33 game. I mean, when Cam cleaned his mechanics up and threw off his back foot because he could get a little sloppy, Cam had a beautiful looking posture, mechanics. He got loose. Hell, Stafford can get loose. Mahomes gets loose. But it was always within Cam to be a beautiful thrower of the football. Like with Anthony, it's just, I mean, again, the layups he misses badly.
Yeah, to me, Cam, when you looked at that Auburn season, even though it was only 1 year, like, kind of knows how to win.
Yeah.
Like he just knew how to get shit done. And then over a course of a couple of years, once the team in Carolina got better, they were just, obviously they were up and down because he was a roller coaster ride. But when he was on, it was clear, like, this is a top 5 quarterback. Then he could turn into like the 13th best. He was all over the map, but his high end, like, you don't even really see that with Anthony Richardson beside one given throw. The other thing is Cam was a way more dominant runner. I mean, Cam's the most physical runner in the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just bigger and stronger and played more powerful. And he didn't break down early. I mean, this guy, every time he goes down, you're like, is he going to get back up? Like right now, Bryce Young is obviously has a chance to be a historic bust. Like, he's probably not going to be on the Panthers next year. I don't know if this guy is that far away. He's just bigger, stronger, faster, right? I mean, they're kind of similar. Like, what the hell's the difference of the two? Well, one guy plays actually in a better organization. One that when other functional quarterbacks come into play, Minshew and Flacco, they win.
Yeah.
So you could argue that he's just bigger. He's a bigger, stronger, throws harder version of Bryce Young.
Yeah. It's time for this week's player I thought might give almost anything to redo his game, brought to you by Uber Eats. Anthony Richardson, disaster. 10 for 32 and a loss to the Texans, a pick, a fumble, left the game at one point. He said he was tired. Every game this season, Richardson has failed to complete 50% of his throws. That was this week's Uber Eats Player of the Week. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Thursday Night Football is on. It's only on Prime Video. Best season yet, packed with big rivalries and even bigger stars. Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit, Kaylee Hartung every week. Games you can't miss. Coverage begins at 7 Eastern with football's best party. TNF tonight, Thursday Night Football tonight. If you're not a Prime member, no problem. Sign up. 30-day free trial. Cancel anytime. Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details. I thought Philadelphia Eagles 37, Bengals 17. I was on the wrong side of this one. Bengals had no run game. And first of all, I thought this was about as important a Philadelphia win. The way they won. No turnovers. Saquon ran 50% on third down. 7 yards of play, nearly. Hurts, again, 10 rushes, 16-20, touchdown, no mistakes. This was a game very easily against Burrow. Burrow's a very good first quarter quarterback. Eagles are not a good first quarter offense. This is a game you could have gotten behind, and it could have unraveled. But as I watched this game, I had two big takeaways. Philadelphia, it feels like to me, John, you're a former scout for the team and you have good context there. It feels like they're asking Jalen to do less in the passing game. They've just come to terms with, we're not throwing it 38 times. That's not what we're going to be. We're not going to do that. And that's fine. I think the Houston Texans sometimes without Nico Collins kind of feel like we're going to box in what we can do offensively. Let's not put our young quarterback at risk. That was my first take. My second take is both of us have felt like Herbert doesn't have the support he deserves, but Herbert now, they've paid for Khalil Mack. I mean, they've paid for Jim Harbaugh. They've paid Herbert. They're going to pay Rashawn Slater. They paid Keenan. They paid Mike Williams. The Chargers have spent money for Justin Herbert. He's had some bad breaks, but we can't call the Chargers cheap anymore. This Cincinnati team, they let go of Mixon, which, by the way, even very good quarterbacks need run games, right? Like even the good ones need run games. They've already moved off defensive players a year before they're going to pay Jamar Chase. And I just watched
be on the team next year.
Yep. And I watched Cincinnati and I thought, we can say what we want about the Chargers, but they have damn good players. They moved off Keenan and Mike Williams because they were older receivers that couldn't stay healthy consistently. They kept Bosa. They kept Khalil Mack. Those are expensive players. They paid Herbert. They're going to pay Slater. They paid Harbaugh. I feel bad for Joe Burrow. I think the Bengals are what the Chargers' reputation was. Like they won't spend the money. Joe Burrow you take Burrow and Chase and that pass rusher off this team, John, they don't have a lot of players in Cincinnati. They don't have a lot of dudes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this. If they fired their coach tomorrow or at the end of the season, he's not getting rehired. So they have a coach that no one else would want. If we just play that game with most good teams, right? The Eagles have such a good roster because you would say they fire Sirianni, no one's hiring him. That's true. But like, I do think their coach, once you have less talent, you have to lean on them a little more. Like, why are the Chargers going to end up winning 10 or 11 games? Star quarterback, star coach. It's not because they have a roster like they have, I would say, for a lot of the last 20 years. Joe did miss the throw a little bit short today that led to the interception, and then it snowballed, right? Then they got a touchdown. Then they fumbled the kickoff, and it just snowballs, and the Eagles ate them alive. To me, there was a talent gap today overall in the team.
Oh, God,
pretty clear. I do think the Eagles, and this ties into the Giants, who we'll see Monday night. Saquon's elevated their team. He's clearly one of the best players in the league. Jalen throws as pretty. I would say, wouldn't you say Jalen is like the 2016 version of Russell Wilson in terms of that deep ball when it's in the air? You think it's going to be completed to one of those two guys?
No, and we've come to realize there are limitations to Russell Wilson, and once he loses sort of the magical elusiveness, you get what you can get out of Russell. I think we elevated with Steichen, we elevated Jalen Hurts to a level that's unfair. He was a second-round pick. He's not a great pocket thrower. I think he throws a pretty deep ball. I think the Russell Wilson comp's very accurate. One's a second-round pick, one's a third-round pick. And I think Philadelphia, it's easy to fall in love with a player because he was so damn good with Steichen. But since he's left, and this is your reality, today was the classic 16-20, some runs. I think they just kept the game in front of Jalen Hurts.
He's definitely running it a little bit more, and he is a fan. To me, he's a better runner because of his power than even peak Russell, who was a really good runner as well. I mean, he's got to be one of the more powerful running quarterbacks we've ever seen. He turns into a running back. And then once you get to the goal line, I mean, we've never seen a play like that. I've been watching football for 30 plus years. I mean, they get to the 1 or 2 yard line. It's like an automatic touchdown. There's nothing you can do. When have we ever seen that? Even if you stop it once, they go right back to it and then they score. I mean, they've had some injuries on the offensive line, so he was running around a little bit. But do I totally trust their defense? Not. But their talent. I mean, you get A.J. Brown, Devontae, Saquon, him. You'll end up getting Goddard back. Like, how many Lions and the fully healthy 49ers? I mean, there's a short list. I watched the Chiefs. It's like, do they have one guy that would start on that team beside of their skill guys? Even Travis Kelce, when he's now at 35, if Goddard's healthy. So you're just, it is a special, and Saquon clearly has this chip of proving himself, and he's healthy. I mean, today he ran a guy over. You get him in the open field. They've had good, DeAndre Swift used to be their running back. They've had Miles Sanders in the past. They've never had anything like this. This feels a little bit like, remember when Jalen was at Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley? Yeah. It's like, this feels like a collegiate offense. And the one thing that I think slows them down sometimes, the coaching staff can kind of get a little tricky. And Jalen, sometimes wants to prove he can be a pocket guy and get himself in a little bit of trouble. But I thought that second half, that's the best half of football the Eagles have played, it feels like, in 2 years.
No, I literally sat there and my takeaway was, if you took the best 22 players in this game, Philly's got 17 to 18 of those 22 players, like the talent gap. But again, Philadelphia spends money. Jeffrey Lurie, he'll spend money on anything. Weight room, everything. I mean, Cincinnati doesn't have an outdoor practice facility still. They're the only northern team that doesn't.
What I wonder is, like, let's say the Bengals end up 6 or 7 wins, right? Obviously, they're in a tough spot now. They fire the coach. Like, what pier is he fishing off to go get his head coach? Historically, it's Zach Taylor's. There weren't a lot of people lined up for him, and he's cheap. Like, he's not talking to the Vrabels, to the Belichicks, to
Nope.
the big name guys. That's just not where they're going to go. So when you sign up, this goes back to Carson Palmer. Like, this organization, like, a lot of the complaints haven't just been entitled athletes bitching and moaning. This is like,
Yeah.
this shouldn't be this way.
Nope.
And you have to wonder, like, it took Dean Spanos, who's down in LA around the Dodgers and Lakers, a long time to go, okay, I need a $15 million coach.
Yep.
And he wants to bring his $3-4 million defensive coordinator. We'll do that too. It's going to be the best thing he's ever done. Because I mean, eventually, if I trust they'll build the thing up, they'll be in a Super Bowl in 3 years.
Yep.
And they would not have been hiring these $4 or $5 million coaches. And listen, you can't tell me with Joe. I thought for most of the game, like, I was like, God, Joe looks good. And people wouldn't be lined up, but they're also not taking the job for $6 million.
That's right.
You're telling me Belichick wouldn't be interested in coaching Joe Burrow? I'd have to think he would be. John, if the organization paid and they would listen to him, but they're not going to change.
I mean, they kept Marvin Lewis forever. I don't think they'll fire Zach Taylor because the Brown family won't pay a dead cap coach money. They won't pay it. They just refuse to pay it. And if you're watching that organization, and I want to pivot to this game, Denver 28, Carolina 14. Denver's now 5-3. So here's a prime example of coaching. One team has Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, elite pass rusher. One team has Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, and no elite pass rushers. Now, Patrick Surtain, I wrote this down today. He may be a top 10 defensive player in the league. He is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, he's good.
But this is what coaching does with Sean Payton. Bo Nix today, who in his last game, I text Sean. I said, man, his mechanics are off. And Sean's like, hey, the kid's great. We're going to get it cleaned up. 3 touchdowns, no picks, 280 yards, 9 different wide receivers, tight end targets, only 1 penalty. When I was watching the game, there may have been more, but when I wrote it down, only 1 penalty. They were tremendous on third down. Now, with Carolina, I get it. Denver was picked to win 5 games by Vegas. They're at 5-3 halfway through the season. They are coaching the you-know-what out of this team. John, this is the same defensive personnel. Remember, because of Russell Wilson, they didn't have any draft picks. They got the Ellis kid out of Utah, I think 3rd round. They got Franklin, the wide receiver, who dropped a ball right through his hands today, a deep ball. And I don't even think Bo Nix would be this good. And he struggled in the first month. But I watched him today, back foot, confidence. This, if you think we're being hard on Zach Taylor, Denver is squeezing every ounce of juice. You tell me how they're generating this pass rush. You tell me how Bo Nix is throwing for 300 yards behind kind of an okay offensive line. I watch Denver and I think that is coaching. That is coaching. That's what I see.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I don't think Denver's roster is very good. I think Vance Joseph last year, when they scored, what Miami scored 70 on them.
Yeah.
And Sean Payton stuck with them, and by the end of the season, they were playing good defense. Their defense, like you said, beside the corner, you have to Google some of the guys on the team.
Yeah.
This is not Neil Smith and Bill Romanowski that you're like, oh, I don't even know who these guys are. And now we're going to find out a lot more about them on Thursday night playing that New Orleans team a week ago. I mean, that was kind of a joke squad, and I didn't even think Bo Nix was that good in that game. The Ravens and the Chiefs coming up. But hell, they don't have to win those games. If you get to 9-8 with this roster and a rookie quarterback, what a great building spot. Now, this is the thing with hiring good coaches. Like, look at LaFleur. He's 6-2 with a starting quarterback in and out of the lineup, completely unfazed. You're going to look up, I don't know how many games Jordan Love, who knows how long he's out. They're going to be an 11-12 win team no matter what. The power of that position in this sport flies by everything else. Is it Aaron Boone's fault that Aaron Judge has no clue what's coming out of the pitcher's hand? There's nothing he can do. Right. Where in coaching, you watch in college last night, Texas A&M has been one of the biggest jokes in college football the last couple of years. And you watch them now, you're like, holy hell, this looks like Alabama or something. And it's because it's not even just about the play calling. It's about the messaging. It's about the structure. It's about the discipline. It's about basic things like, how you practice the first 10 minutes of warm-ups, what is okay and what is not okay. If you come out with the wrong stuff, do I make you go back in and change, or do I let it slide? And I think you just see the separating. You see the Jets are a good example. They got no clue what they're doing. It's one of the worst coaching staffs in the league.
It is
And
the
then
worst
you look,
coaching staff.
and
Yeah.
then you look, I think Denver and the Chargers are very, very good examples. They have no business. You could say the Chargers a little bit because they do have a good quarterback, an experienced quarterback to win 10 games with their roster. If I give half the coaches in the NFL those teams, they don't sniff 10 wins, right? But I give Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton, and what do they make a combined $35 million? They make it for a reason, because you're going to feel pretty good about them winning double-digit games every year going forward. And the other thing that we don't talk a lot about with coaches, who do you hire as your staff? It's one of the Harbaugh family's great attributes. I would say Sean Payton, for the most part, has always had good coaching staffs.
Yes.
Dan Campbell was assistant. Dennis Allen's not a good head coach, but he's an excellent defensive coordinator. So he had a staff. And now, listen, I was skeptical of Vance Joseph, but you got to give him a lot of credit. Like, their defense is flying around. So that's your job is more than just calling plays or the draft. Right. Like, it encompasses a lot.
Yeah. And the other thing, this is one of the things Sean McVay does so well. You're often asking yourself, how did Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua get so open? Well, that scheme. I mean, it's like in the Super Bowl when Andy Reid has Sky Moore in the red zone wide open. You're like, there's only so much space. How is Sky Moore not covered at the 12? I'm watching Denver, and there were multiple times today. You're like, now, again, it's Carolina, but I'm seeing this time and time again. When they beat the Jets, we thought it was a fluke. No, Denver is better with Bo Nix. They're a better football team than the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. And the Jets have significantly better players overall.
Oh,
no
close.
Not even close. And so I'm just watching Denver today, and I'm like, this is like, and I've texted Peyton a couple of times, like, this is what a well-coached team looks like. They should have beaten Carolina badly. They did. They should have beaten New Orleans badly. They did. But they're also winning that Jets game. You look at and you think, God, it was terrible weather. Bo Nix there's no reason in the world Bo Nix goes and plays cross country. If I recall, their travel was bad, and beats Aaron Rodgers in a like a semi-tropical storm. Peyton won't get coach of the year, but he should be honorable mention, because I think what he's doing with this roster is incredible.
Yeah, I think you just see so many examples of guys that, like, sometimes they might inherit some talent, and then as time goes on, I think Mike McDaniel is a good example. Listen, he's got a lot of friends in the media. I think, I don't know him personally, but I just think his teams have been one of the most overrated squads over the last couple of years. And now you watch them today lose to Arizona. They're soft. I mean, and they really have been down the stretch of the last year, when they should have cruised to that division championship, right, in the AFC East. Then you watch them this year. I'm not blaming them for poor offense when Tua gets the concussion, but the whole team just falls apart. And then you get him back and they look dramatically better. Like Mike McDaniel, like, yeah, he can scheme up some good plays, but can he be a good head coach? And to me, the answer is no. And they're going to be terrible. And then you look around the league at some of these other guys like D'Amico. He's got injuries. He's got all sorts of shit going. His quarterback's not playing well. And then you just look up. It's like, yeah, they're going to be like 12-5. Like, some guys just really know what they're doing. And because, like, when times get tough, Tomlin's a good example of this. The standard in which you make guys practice every day has to be really fit. It's really easy now to just, another walkthrough. You don't need to do pads today. Like, that's just not allowed certain places. And then that translates to these games, because 80% of the games you play in the NFL are going to be pretty tightly contested in the second half. This is not college football where you look up and it's 30-10 in half the games. That's not the way the NFL works. And even the morning, you look at the slate this morning when I turn on the TVs at 10 o'clock, I'm like, this is a shitty slate. Halfway through, it's like, that's pretty entertaining.
That's how I felt. It was great. Crazy. Now for a segment called Making It Look Easy, brought to you by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Jared Goff made it look easy. 12 of 15, 3 touchdowns, blowout win over the hapless Titans. Lions have scored more touchdowns than Goff incompletions over the last 5 games. Just like Jared makes it look easy, Morgan & Morgan does the same. So easy to submit a claim. They have over 100 offices nationwide, more than 800 lawyers, and through the years, over And through the years, $15 billion recovered for their clients who get full and fair compensation because they're fighting for you. Morgan & Morgan, fighting for the people for over 35 years. If you're ever injured, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound 529 to check out America's largest injury law firm. Winning in the NFL is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Okay, great stuff. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, 3 and out. I'll tell you, the Chicago Bears, there is going to be stories written for the next 2 weeks on that coaching mess. Yes, you say they should have won. I say I can't believe it was that close. I've never been happier. I root for better coaching. Chicago's coaching was a disaster today. Go back and listen to the first 10, 15 minutes of this podcast and check that out.
You see the ratings on the old Yankees-Dodgers? It's like 14 million people watching these games.
16.5 million watched game 2, the last 2 or 3 innings. 16.5. Let's talk about that for a second. So for years, people have said to me, I would say about 12 years ago, I just stopped baseball. I just said, I'll talk about it in October. And a lot of that was I was getting more and more information from ESPN and Fox on minute-to-minute ratings in cable. You can get minute-to-minute ratings. And what you were finding out is that, and I just poured over these ratings every day for years and years. This is what you found out. The audience rewards you when you talk 2 things. Urgency, the games have to matter, and stars. Well, there's no urgency in baseball until October, like none. And the sport doesn't have a bunch of stars. And then Ohtani goes to the Dodgers, Aaron Judge, Yankees start, get to the World Series, and Mookie Betts and Bryce Harper. Now you got about 4 guys who you can just put on the screen and people go, oh, that's Mookie Betts. Oh, that's Shohei Ohtani. I'm watching that game. I don't remember a world. I grew up with the Red Sox in 1976. Bench, Rose, Morgan, Perez, Carlton Fisk. Like you go back. I can remember the names now.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at that game and I'm thinking, Jesus, there's 7 Hall of Famers here. Now, Judge is having a terrible World Series. And I had said before the series, I think Shohei is the best player in the series. I think Mookie Betts is actually the second best player. His versatility, shortstop, second base, outfielder, speed, average power. But it proves once again, the consumer is always right. The consumer was telling you for years, we're just not that interested in Alabama, Georgia. College football dipped for about a 6-year, 8-year stretch. It got too regional. The audience said we're fatigued with Alabama, Clemson. Now college football ratings are going up. Alabama doesn't dominate. Georgia's not quite as good. Here comes Texas. Here comes Ohio State. Here comes Oregon. The audience tells you what to do as a talk show host. And I watched the National League playoffs, the Dodgers, Padres, and I'm like, there's like 8 great players here. Dodgers, Mets,
Phillies.
Mets, Phillies.
Great. Yeah.
And it's like, so 16.5 million people, that'll beat some NFL games. And it's like, yes, we'll talk baseball. You have to give us urgency. I've argued for years, I'd cut out April and half of May. I'd have 120 games. I'd get rid of 40. I'd start the playoffs August 8th. And by Labor Day, you'd be heading to the World Series, playing in the same weather you did for the entire series instead of night games in October, November. So I just think the series has been, you can't take your eyes off it.
No, it's riveting theater. I do think, and it really hit me last night watching Judge, who looks like, me in Little League or something right now. It's the only sport where the guy that has the best season, you could argue the best player in the American League this year is going to win the MVP. Can, even Russell Westbrook or Lamar Jackson, guys that have had bad playoffs, they have bad games, but they are not completely useless. When you can't hit like that, I mean, he can barely make contact. You're just useless. Remember, A-Rod had some moments when he was on the Yankees when he got there. You're like, God, they got to move him down in the lineup. You're just worthless. And to me, that's even more riveting. It's like, is this guy gonna get it? Can this guy even get bat to the ball? And to me, that I just think we've obviously haven't seen this matchup since when, like 1981. So it's part of it. You said the Alabama Georgia thing. You felt if we got Dodgers Yankees 7 years in a row, it wouldn't quite feel as cool.
That's right.
Feels like we've been waiting for this thing for a decade because both these two teams have been so good. I think the Yankees are in trouble. I mean, clearly. I mean, they've lost some devastating. Their guys can't run. That's the thing with the Dodgers. I mean, Shohei Ohtani's 6'5". He runs like he's Justin Jefferson, right?
Yeah.
Mookie Betts is an NFL athlete. Stanton can't run. but he hits home runs. But if he's not hitting home runs and Judge's not hitting, they got no shot.
Well, I mean, Tommy Edman,
Who's that guy? He's incredible. Where do they find that guy?
he was the National League MVP. In game one, he hit 8th. I mean, people talk about the Big Red Machine was the greatest offense in 75, but by the time you got to like the 7th in the batting order, it was Dave Concepcion and Cesar Geronimo. I mean, you have the last 3 guys couldn't hit. When you have guys like, I mean, like Will Smith and Tommy Edman, you're like, these guys are on fire. They run, they can hit for power. The Dodgers lineup, I mean, it was really interesting in game one when Aaron Boone, and I thought to myself, this is going to be a bullpen series, especially for the Dodgers. It's going to be a bullpen series. So, keep Yamamoto in or a Flaherty as long as you can, because you're gonna just test your bullpen. The Dodgers don't cross your fingers on Walker Buehler gives you 5 innings. Yeah. But the Yankees, they have better starting pitching, you could argue. And when Aaron Boone pulled Garrett Cole after 88 pitches, I'm like, Aaron, you have like 7 elite hitters in this lineup. If you have to go to a second and a third bullpen guy, you're in big trouble. Until you face the Dodgers lineup, it's. I mean, you and I watch it because it's in the summer. I just keep baseball games are on in the house. The Dodgers have had 40 different pitchers, and they're in the World Series. What does that tell you about their lineup? 40 different pitchers.
I know that Bruce Bochy would have needed his 3rd stint before he pulled out Garrett Cole in that moment. And he's the best postseason manager of the last 25 years. I get that, the front office, that's insane. That really is. And that to me is the deterioration of baseball. Like when I was a kid in the 90s, baseball was huge. Their star players weren't just Ken Griffey and Barry Bonds. They were the pitchers.
Yes.
Because those guys on any given moment could go 130 pitches complete game. And he had 88. It's not like it's one thing. It's like, well, we didn't want to push him past 110. 88 pitches, and he was mowing people down. That's insane. Even last night with Ohtani's buddy from Japan, what'd they pull him with? Like 85? Like, what are we doing here? This is the World Series. This isn't August, but that's the sport.
And I would argue, at least with the Yankees, Judge isn't hitting, and the middle, the back part of their lineup isn't as scary.
No, they're in trouble.
Yeah, Jazz Chisholm's not hitting. So, but you look down to the Dodgers and you get into, I mean, Max Muncy got on base 12 straight times. I said, you don't see that in Williamsport. 12 straight times in the playoffs.
I mean, I grew up in Northern California. I hate the Dodgers and the Lakers. And right now, Anthony Davis looks like Wilt Chamberlain, and the Dodgers look like they're about to sweep the Yankees. This is my worst nightmare.
John Middlekauff. Great stuff, bud.
See ya.